Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first concurrent session of the conference. My name is Sally Towns and I'm the Executive Director of Brisbane Catholic Education. And it gives me a great pleasure to welcome Barbara Coupar to the session. But before we get into Barbara's presentation, of course, there are a few housekeeping things that we just need to work through. So firstly, I am just going to ask that you turn your mobiles either off or turn to silent. We are here for a 40-minute session today. So the session will leave about 10 minutes for questions. When you have a question, I'm saying when you have your question, if you could make your way to the microphone, because we have a number of delegates coming online so that they can hear your question. And when you do ask your question, if you could just provide your name and your affiliation, that would be very helpful and helpful for Barbara, no doubt. If you do need to leave the room early for whatever reason, but obviously knowing that you're going to leave, if you could sit towards the back of the room to make sure that we are not disrupting Barbara. And standing isn't permitted in the room, so you do need to stay seated. We will be concluding at 2:25 to allow you 10 minutes to make the next session wherever you're going, which they all commence at 2:35. Did I say 2:25 for 2:35? Sorry. I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. So let me introduce Barbara. So Barbara's title of her presentation is Catholic Identity, Shaping Learning, Service and Action in the Catholic School. So Barbara Coupar is the Director of the Scottish Catholic Education Service. In 1998, Barbara started her teaching career at Notre Dame High School, Greenock, as RE teacher and then acting assistant principal teacher of guidance. Appointed principal teacher of RE in 2001, she took on the role of acting deputy head teacher in 2007. Barbara was appointed to the post of RE advisor to SCES, the Archdiocese of Glasgow and the Diocese of Motherwell in January 2009. While remaining in the SCES role, she also became RE coordinator for the Diocese of Motherwell in 2013. Barbara studied theology and religious studies at the University of Glasgow, gaining a Bachelor of Divinity, and went on to St Andrew's College of Education, where she qualified as a teacher of religious education. She's also obtained 2 postgraduate certificates in educational leadership at the University of Stirling. In 2015, Barbara gained a postgraduate diploma in emerging leadership of Christian schools, and she holds a master degree in Catholic school leadership from St Mary's University, London. Barbara is married to Marlon, and she's stepmum to 2 children. Barbara, you are very welcome. Please make her welcome.
So the teacher in me doesn't really like standing behind here, but you'll understand that for the people who've joined us on Zoom, this is probably the best way to pick up my voice. If I begin to speak too fast, just somebody wave at me, okay, and I'll try to slow down the pace. I've been introducing myself to as many people as possible, saying I'm Barbara from Scotland, and somebody said to me just before lunch, you can drop the second part. We know that. But what I was trying to convey is I'm Barbara from Scotland, literally flew in to be with you. I arrived Sunday morning. So I've set my watch for a wee alarm so as I remember to stop to allow questions. So my watch is set for 5:20 a.m. So that's hopefully I won't babble too much as I'm still in a kind of a mindset of being across 2 different hemispheres. One of the things which I've noticed is that at the beginning of each session, there's this acknowledgement of your history and your country and all of those who are your heritage. And as a visitor, in all humility, I feel that it's something which is important for me to state as well, perhaps even more so coming from Scotland, and I know that many of my ancestors came to Australia and perhaps many of my ancestors need to journey to that point of reconciliation as well. So thank you so much for having me, for inviting me to be with you. I feel a kindred spirit with you Australian Catholic teachers in a particular way when I've been listening to the conversation about your 200th anniversary. We celebrated 100 years of state-funded Catholic education back in 1918. It's not 100 years of Catholic education in Scotland because, like yourselves, we built an education system on, as we heard this morning, the shoulder of giants, our religious sisters, our priests. We were an immigrant nation coming from Ireland. We were in poverty, and our bishops decided to build schools first and then parishes because they knew that in order to assist our people out of poverty, education was the only way to do that. And this icon, if you're at the back, by the way, can I just say, you'll not have one of my wee prayer cards because I started at the front, but like good Catholics, you're all sitting at the back first. So if there's not one sit on your seat of our icon of Jesus the teacher, please come down and grab one before you leave today. This is our icon, which we had commissioned for 2018. It's of Jesus, our teacher, and it tells our story. And it's really, I'm going to come back to it towards the end, but for us, this is part of our legacy. It's part of regrowing our identity as Catholic schools within Scotland, because we became a bit schizophrenic for a while. We're state-funded schools. We don't have to pay a penny for our schools in Scotland, for our Catholic schools. The church doesn't pay a penny for our teachers, for our buildings, nothing. It all comes from local government and national government. And because of that, we have begun to adopt and articulate the language of education according to the way the government wants us to, and we've forgotten our own language and our own culture. So we used 2018 as a point to really re-articulate who we were, and I'll come back to the icon to tell you more about that. So just a little bit, this is my house. It's a fixer-upper, you know. So Scotland, I've been talking to so many people who have a heritage in Scotland themselves or have been to Scotland. It's a beautiful place. It's a very, very, very small place. When I hear of all your schools, all your dioceses, I'm so aware of the fact that for us, we kind of roll our eyes if we have to travel 2 hours to get to a meeting, and I'm hearing people commute 2 hours a day each way here. So we're very small. We only have 8 dioceses. And in the last census of our nation, Roman Catholics, the people who identified themselves as Roman Catholics, were 15.9%. So we're just about 16% of the population. So we're a significant minority within Scotland. We have 8 dioceses, as I mentioned, and across those dioceses we have 309 Catholic primary schools. Those are for children aged roughly about 5 to 12, although some of our schools have nurseries attached to them, but they are non-denominational. We also have 52 Catholic secondary schools. We have 2 Catholic schools for children with additional support needs, and we only have 3 fee-paying schools that are Catholic, and those are kind of historic and linked to the Jesuits in one instance and Notre Dame, the Sisters of Notre Dame and the others. So state-funded Catholic schools educate 20% of the school population in Scotland. So we educate more children than we have who are Catholic, and probably like yourselves, the dynamics of what is happening within our schools is really interesting. More and more parents from other world religions and of no belief at all are choosing Catholic schools because, as we heard again this morning, they educate the whole child and they see something within our schools that they want. But that change in the dynamic within our schools and amongst our teachers means that in certain circumstances, identifying who we are and what makes us distinctive has become quite difficult. As you can see from the way the numbers are up there, we have a dense population of Catholics in the West Central Belt. That's because many of our ancestors came over from Ireland. They got off the boat. They didn't move, basically. They just kind of got their houses, and that was them. So within the Archdiocese of Glasgow and the metropolitan area of the Archdiocese of Glasgow is where you would find the most Catholics living, and therefore the most Catholic schools. We have no secondary schools higher than Dundee. So we have no secondary schools in the in the Diocese of Aberdeen, and we have no secondary schools in our islands either. Although we do have significant proportions of Catholics there, but we don't have any secondary schools. So one of the questions we have been asking ourselves is, 100 years later, if we have accomplished what we set out to do, which is to bring the Catholic population out of poverty, to allow them to have the same chances in life as the non-Catholics within Scotland, do we still have a right to be there? Do we still have something distinctive to offer? And when all of your teachers are employed by the local authority, there can sometimes be a tension, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. There's that kind of tension about, but they pay my wages, but the church has my mission. And we see something of a conflict, particularly amongst our senior leaders, regarding the purpose of their school and their accountability to the government. So their accountability in terms of all the things we heard this morning, all the measurements, all the exam results. And so my role, really, on behalf of the 8 bishops of Scotland, is to try to ensure that our purpose makes us accountable. That as Catholic schools, our distinctive nature is articulated, and we are making our way within Scotland in a manner which allows us to still be true to our mission, while also being excellent at what we do. I coin a little phrase. I've heard excellence used a lot just over the last day that we've been here. We say about our Catholic schools, we strive for perfection, but will tolerate excellence. So our history. Back in 1918, with the Westminster government, they offered all schools in Scotland the opportunity to come into the state system. That included the Church of Scotland. And only the Catholics and one evangelical church decided to do that. So we are 20% of the population. We're really the only denominational schools within Scotland. We have one Jewish school, and then, as I say, we have one other Protestant school, but that's it. So when you talk about denominational schools or schools of religion in Scotland, you're talking about Catholic schools. But our bishops had a line in the sand which they would not give up. They handed over all of their land, they handed over all of their buildings, but what they would not give up was the right to approve their teachers and the right to have in law the content of religious education. And the reason they said that was, if you have the right people and you have the right content in religious education, you will always maintain a Catholic identity. So one of the things which we have tried to, and we continue to endeavour to do, is to show that Catholic schools are good for Scotland. In fact, that was our tagline for 2018, Catholic schools, good for Scotland. It was a wee play on words because we were kind of saying, good for Scotland having Catholic schools. As you know, in our country, there's a lot of sectarianism, and Catholic schools are often blamed for that. We're very much told that if we just got out the way, sectarianism in Scotland would go. I kind of say, well, let's get rid of Celtic and Rangers, and then sectarianism might go. But Catholic schools are also good for Scotland. Our young people come out with a sense of ambition and a knowledge of the common good. They want to serve and they want to be of service. So today I want to share a little bit of how we try to do that. The dynamics of our school are changing. This is our only girls' school, Notre Dame, which is up at the top here, which is now actually just turned co-ed. It's in the city centre of Glasgow, just the west end of it. And then we have Holyrood High School. As you can see just from the young people here, these are sixth-year boys and girls. The diversity of our young people is something quite spectacular. Our schools are truly comprehensive. They take in people from all learning abilities, and they take in people of all religions and none. And so in order to be able to meet their needs, we've had to think about what is our mission and vision. And we've been challenging our schools to think about what is the identity of your school. Because our overall aim is to think, where is that overall mission where we're going to? Because if we don't know where the head teacher, that's what we call principals, if we don't know where the head teacher is leading us, how can we take other people with us? And so we try to think about Catholic leadership as one word and not two separate things within our schools. You're a Catholic leader. You're not just a Catholic who happens to be a leader. And so for that, there's an integration of trying to understand what we actually mean by Catholic leadership and what we actually mean by Catholic schools. Is it just a school that happens to have Catholic religious education permeate the whole curriculum? Is it just a school that does good deeds? Is it just a school that is values-based? Because I can tell you the non-denominational school next door is also values-based and probably has a values tree as you go in. They steal everything from us, I'm telling you. All our good works, all our good words. So I come back all the time to saying, let's think of the four marks of the church. One, holy, Catholic and apostolic. If we say, and we should on our regular basis when we profess our creed, that I believe in one holy Catholic and apostolic church, I would like to think that we could also say that our schools should be one holy Catholic and apostolic schools. One, we're part of the universal church. Our Archbishop who died recently, who was our president for education, used to say all the time, we're the Catholic schools in Scotland, not the Catholic schools of Scotland. We're not like the Church of Scotland where we have set up a church within Scotland. We're part of that universal church. We have a history. We have a heritage. Holy, we're helping our young people to become saints, however that is for them. We're helping our parents, our teachers to become saints, and that's not about being on your knees all the time. That's about our acts of service and our acts of love. Catholic, we're open to all, truly universal, truly able to accept others, because accepting others doesn't change who I am. Accepting others doesn't dilute the Catholic dimension of who we are. But if we're not universal, then can we really say that we're a Catholic school? And apostolic, that it is our role to be teachers, to be both disciple and apostle, to know who Jesus the teacher is, to share that with our young people, and to fulfill the mission of the church, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. For some, that invitation will never land in their ears and they'll never hear it fully, and it won't be something which ever comes to fruition. For others, the seeds of evangelisation that we give within our schools is going to bear fruit, maybe way past whenever they leave school. I was an RE teacher for years, and I used to love it when I bumped into my pupils years later, and they'd go, Miss. Now, I'm going to use a Scottish phrase here. They'd say, Miss, I just got my kid done. That means baptised. I just got my kid done. And I'm getting married next week. You think to yourself, okay, I've succeeded somewhere. But let's face it, if it was about the number of baptisms, we'd all be out of a job, wouldn't we? But it's about those pre-evangelisation moments and those evangelisation moments, and helping our teachers to see that we need to look through the lens of the Catholic faith in order to understand our identity. We need to stop doing things twice, once for the government and once for the church. Once in order to fulfil that lesson planning and the strategy and the improvement plans and tick all the boxes, and then again because the diocese is going to be coming in to check where you are on your improvement plan, etc. If we think about it carefully and we do everything through the lens of faith, then we can do it once and we can do it well. And so how do we do that in Scotland? Well, I want to share with you just 3 very quick examples of how we're trying to take our identity and embed it in what we do to accompany and form our pupils and our teachers. Here on the left-hand side, as you're looking at it, is our little emblem for the Pope Francis Faith Award. The Pope Francis Faith Award is for young people transitioning from primary school into secondary school. And it takes the gifts of the Holy Spirit and it asks them to think about them as though they were explorers, and all of the gifts of the Holy Spirit were there to accompany them on their journey. They reflect on the 7 gifts and they try to put them into action. So it's very much focused on prayer, reflection, and action. We're trying to get our young people to think about how their faith or how their belief, because for some of them they haven't quite articulated it as faith yet, will help them to navigate the world, will help them to become not what they're meant to be, but who they're meant to be. And then on the other side, benchmarking that, if you like, we have the Pope Benedict Caritas Award. We instituted this after Pope Benedict visited Scotland. And one of the things that he said to our young people is, the church now belongs to you. This award is for 18-year-olds, 17 and 18-year-olds who are about to leave our schools and make their way into the world. And it's intended to bridge that safe, nurturing environment that the Catholic school is and give them the opportunity to understand the volunteering that they do, to understand the service, like we heard this morning, people going into food kitchens and helping the elderly, to see that through the lens of faith. It's a 1-year programme that expects them to explore Deus Caritas Est, to look at Scripture, and to then see how the Spirit prompts them from that learning to act, not the other way about, not to reverse engineer that they happen to be helping at a soup kitchen, and then what does that actually mean for them? And then we also have just introduced Laudato Si Schools Scotland. And you'll see again, we're using those 3 things: pray, learn, act. We've taken the goals that the Holy Father has given us for Laudato Si, and we've integrated ecological education across the whole of the curriculum. And our hope is that from primary 1, from age 5, all the way through to their senior phase, when they're sitting their exams and they're about to leave, that they will be able to consider how they have a responsibility to love God, to love their neighbour, to care for the environment, and to ensure that what they're learning in their Catholic school is something which they can take into the world. So back to our icon. This tells our story, and our story is a very particular one in Scotland. We start up in the top corner with the call of Andrew, and the waters of the Jordan flow behind Jesus to Iona, to where St. Columba was. And then as you come down our icon, we have the saints of Scotland. We have Ninian depicted in the hills of Galloway. And is that God calling me? No. Just in case he needed me for something. We have St. Margaret of Scotland. We also have St. John Ogilvie, our most recent martyr and the last saint of Scotland. And along the front, we have our ancestors, the people who built our schools. And then we have 8 children depicting our 8 dioceses. And as you can see, they reflect the diversity of the young people within our schools. But you can't help but notice that front and centre is Jesus, our teacher. We've tried to incorporate some Celtic knots into his robes, but as you can see, he is the one looking at us. He is our teacher. And the inscription, both in Scots Gaelic and in English, says, "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so. I am." And I think for us as Catholic educators in Scotland, our 100-year anniversary, perhaps like your 200-year anniversary, was a moment to reset. It was a moment to remind ourselves of who we are and what we have to offer the world, and to stop hiding behind the secular language which is being imposed on our schools, and to celebrate why we're different, why we're distinctive, and why we're good for Scotland. Thank you. I think we have some time for questions. I could keep on speaking if there are no questions. I love talking. It's a Scots thing. So please just give a wee second just to chat to the person next to you, and then if anybody has a question, even if it's on behalf of someone else, you know, then please feel free, and I'll do my best to answer. I'm sorry, they're making you go to a mic.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm an assistant principal at St Mary MacKillop College in Canberra, so there's an immediate connection. And my family, I've got a Scottish background, and they came out during the to Australia because of persecution from sectarianism. I was just curious if you could expand a little bit more, because we don't have this experience in Australia in terms of governance, and you were saying that tension that exists between, you know, because all your funding comes from the government and we get some funding, but you're sort of answerable to the state, and yet you're connected to the archdiocese. How do your bishops kind of communicate in terms of that governance? How does that actually operate? At the end of the day, ultimately, who are you actually answerable to? I think you're probably going to say the state, but just in terms of that governance, how perhaps at a higher level do they sort of manage that tension?
Sure, thank you for your question. Yeah, so it can be a bit tricky. What will happen is that schools are established based on need in Scotland. So where there is enough parental pressure and where they're building housing schemes, etc., they'll build a Catholic school. And then once they've built the Catholic school, it comes under the ownership of the local authority, which is your local government, similar to what you would have here. And the church's role is one which is quite simple, but actually one which ensures that the bishops have overall control, if you like. And that is that they get to approve every single teacher. So in law, it states that in order to teach in a Catholic school, any post must prove to the Secretary of State that you are both qualified and approved by the denominational body in whose interest the school is managed. So that means that anyone who applies for a role within a Catholic school, whether you're Catholic or not, has to submit a form to the local bishop to seek his approval. The bishop has absolute right in law to say, based on your religious belief and your character, yes or no to that. Now, as you can imagine, that's complex, and there are often concerns that is a challenge to those who would like to teach in Catholic schools because they love the ethos and the culture, but they don't necessarily want to sign up to everything that the Catholic Church teaches. So we have in place a charter for Catholic schools, and I've brought a couple of wee copies, and basically every single teacher has to sign up to this and say that they will do this. Now, one of the things on the charter is a commitment to uphold the moral teachings, faith tradition, and sacramental life of the Catholic Church. So for some teachers, that's just a no-go for them. And one of the things we say is, well, maybe the Catholic school is not for you then. There's 80% of the schools are non-Catholic, so maybe you would be better fit there. For other people, this is a moment of pastoral care and pastoral intervention. We've got so many young Catholics who are pushing on the door to teach in Catholic schools, and people of other faiths, I have to say, that sometimes we have to take this as a moment and say, what is the obstacle here to that? And can we, through a kind of spiritual accompaniment and formation of our teachers, help them to see that actually they'd be an asset to our school, that we need people of different voices, that we need people of different perspectives. So that's the main way in which the governance happens. But second to that, my role is national. I work on behalf of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland, and I have a seat at the table with Scottish Government. So I'm on their strategic board for teacher education. I'm on their head teacher recruitment working group. I work with them, for example, we've, as you may have heard, and there was quite a lot of media about it, we've introduced recommendations to become the first country in the world that has LGBT inclusive education inherent in what we do. I was part of the working group to do that. So I'm only one voice, but I'm quite a loud Catholic voice at those meetings, and try to ensure that I best represent our history, our culture, and what it is that we have to offer, and not just to go along with everything that the government is saying. So it can be quite a tense thing, but it's something which is the bishops really believe in.
Paul Meldrum, Barbara. Just a quick question. You've got 308 primary schools, 50 secondary schools. Is there a decline in the secondary students?
No, an increase. An increase. We're just about to build our first brand new Catholic school for secondary school pupils in about 20 years. Yeah, it's a strange phenomenon actually that Catholics won't identify themselves as Catholics on the census anymore, but they want to send their children to Catholic schools. We call them cradle Catholics. I don't know if you call that here. You know, so our parishes are declining, our schools are increasing. And at a recent conference I was at actually with our European counterparts, one of the bishops from the Vatican said that he thought it was really interesting that in England and Scotland we built our schools first and then our parishes, and said, I wondered if we should go back to that. Just no bishops in here.
Hi, I'm Selena Stanford from the finance team in Canberra. And I'm just wondering, like, it sounds like you have a lovely charter that the teachers have to sign up for before they come into a Catholic schools. And it sounds like you have a lovely problem of people, like teachers wanting to come in and teach at Catholic schools. But I wonder you talked about Catholic leadership, and true Catholic leadership comes from the heart and not the head. And I just wonder whether there's any sort of any special formation you do for your teachers for heart faith and not head faith?
Thank you. Yeah, that was one of our legacy items from 2018. It's something, so head teacher recruitment and retention is shocking in Scotland just now. And it's not just because of the pandemic. Nobody wants to be a principal. They see the work of a principal. They see how knackered you all are. They see all the work that you put in. And they say, thanks very much, I'll just stay. See, for the pay differential, I don't know what it's like here, but at home the pay differential isn't great between being a deputy principal and being a principal. But I've noticed as well that all of the, so in Scotland, it's a legal requirement to undertake an academic qualification to become a principal. There's no formation within that. So I've noticed that, going back to this tension between local authority and the church, and our principals don't necessarily always put the Catholic dimension of the school first. So we introduced a programme called the Good Shepherd Leadership Pathway in 2018. And really, it takes the motif of the Good Shepherd from the Old Testament, from the Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, where you are way through to Peter, and love me. And what we try to say is authority comes from love. Your authority as a principal comes because you can answer, yes, I love you, Jesus. Not because you've got all the grades and the qualifications to say, I've managed to get through this. So it's a bit of a cultural change, but it's been really successful so far that our Good Shepherd Leadership Programme, which we start very young in your career. So we try to identify aspiring leaders, and we try to form them and nurture them and accompany them all the way through by giving them opportunities to reflect on what it is to be, as I mentioned, a Catholic leader, not a Catholic who is a leader. So ultimately, what we want is for people to understand that the job interview to become a principal is one question: do you love me? Yeah. Apparently that's us time up, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll be in trouble from the superannuation people if we don't move you on. And I don't want to do that. Barbara, thank you very, very much. I think on behalf of all of you, and I don't have a lot of time just to wrap up, but it was a wonderful opportunity to hear about the Scottish experience. Despite our differences, particularly around the history and the governance, as we've heard, there are a lot more similarities that our Australian context and the Scottish context has, particularly in reference to leadership and that idea that, we are Catholic leaders, not leaders who are Catholic. That formation, as we've just heard about, of all staff, ensuring that our Catholic identity remains strong and that we are relevant, and that, I certainly wrote that down as a quote, why Catholic schools are good for Scotland, and replace Scotland with Australia, and we would all agree that we are hugely important for society at large. So, Barbara, on behalf of all of us, thank you so very much. Could you please show your appreciation for Barbara?